Hello, and welcome to Presenting Yourself with Confidence by Silicon Valley English. My name is Sunil Modi, and today we'll be covering how to put the body of a presentation together. In presentation theory, we kind of went over the main moving parts of a presentation: the audience, the message, medium, and the speaker, and what mentality we need to have in order to tell our story to relate to our target audience. So today, I'm going to be addressing how to put the message together, beginning with the body of a presentation because I think it's the most important component. Then I'm going to cover how we start, what are the ways we organize the presentation, and finally, how much content should we put into it. This is strictly my opinion that any presentation that is delivered should have a point, something for the audience to take away with them, force the audience to think and make a decision. That means by the end of the presentation, the outcome should be something in between nice, but not for me, or heck yeah, I really learned something today and I'm gonna apply it immediately. When thinking about where to start making your presentation, a lot of people tend to start at the introduction and get stuck. I actually advise you to start with the body of the presentation. This will naturally guide you on how to open and close your audience. First and foremost, I cannot stress this enough, but it's a good idea to outline what you want your audience to think about or take away when you're done with your presentation. This is what you call your main point. The body of the presentation has a general level of organization to it and should be presented in a logical way that makes the most impact. And as a public speaker, you're really just a storyteller, and your goal is to get people hooked. Any other outcome and the presentation has lost its purpose. If the audience is confused, not sure what direction you're taking, then that's feedback you need to listen to and tweak for the next presentation. Interestingly enough, there was a study done between an organized presentation and an unorganized presentation from the perspective of the audience's comprehension level. One would think that the audience that listened to the disorganized presentation would have comprehended far less information. However, this wasn't the case at all. Both audiences were actually able to comprehend the information they received. The key difference was that the audience's perception of the speaker changed. The audience felt that the organized speaker was more competent and therefore more knowledgeable about the subject. So organization isn't so much so that your audience gets your message, as much as it is about how your audience perceives you to know what you're actually talking about. There are two main types of presentations that are primarily done. First and foremost, it's either a sales pitch or problem solving, and second, it's educating or informing. For sales presentations, I take the approach of problem solving. That is to say that a customer has some issue and your product can help solve it. This is by far a very exaggerated example with far more topics than necessary, but should give you a good starting point and idea on how to build the general flow. First and foremost, my main topic is identifying the customer base. My subtopics are identifying a new customer base, or it's an existing customer base with new services. My second main talking point is how do we know this is our customer base? How do I identify the opportunities? Are they small, medium business? Are they specialized services? What is it that identifies this customer base? My third main talking point, what happens if we don't go after this customer base? What's the impact of not selling into this new market? How do we solve this? Now we give detailed steps on how to approach the market. And then finally, how do we track sales to ensure that we're actually tracking success? Now this flow is true of whether you're selling office supplies or the dream solution. However you slice it, there's always a margin, quality, supply chain, or unrealized revenue from an untapped market problem to solve. This particular flow sets up the problem and then knocks it down. The other flow that's most commonly done is education or informing people about something that you've done or something that you're really passionate about. This approach is really just relaying your own life story or events that influenced you. There really is no set format. However, I do have a few recommended formats for this. For every story, it's typically a journey, and through the journey, there's something learned. You want to convey what you've learned because you found it powerful and influential for your own life, and we want others to benefit from our experience. This can also be considered a persuasive presentation because ultimately we're trying to convince the audience of our perspective and why it's so beneficial for others. So start by asking yourself some really simple questions. The basics, the who, what, where, when, why, and how. Who was involved? What was learned? Where did this take place? When did this take place? How old were you? What was the time period? Why did you do what you did? Describe that thought process. And how did you know that you had gotten to the point you wanted to get to? These are just some really simple sample questions to get your mind moving in the right direction. Another way to think of the presentation is like constructing a building. First lay the foundation, then the support pillars, and then each floor gets stacked on top. This is a really simple description, but the idea is to logically stack one idea on top of another until you have the entire concept explained. It's good that every single story has very similar components. A central character, a place, a time period, and some events that happen to the main character, and finally a conclusion. The best way to convey a story is to be detailed, be descriptive, be emotional, and convey what you saw, what you heard, and what you felt throughout the entire experience. There are still some other ways to organize a presentation. First and foremost, there's the chronological order, probably the most common and most basic. Maybe you're giving a presentation on a particular era in history. Let's take the Roman Empire, for example. The presentation can start with defining what an empire is, when the first Roman Empire was recognized, and then signs of the rise and the height of the empire, and finally signs of collapse and eventual downfall of the Roman Empire. Another way to organize your presentation is a geographical or regional presentation. If you're telling your audience that they should visit somewhere, you can break it up by popular tourist routes or major cities and attractions. For these, I like to actually tell my audience how I would travel from one destination to another and what to expect, how the people are, what the environment is like, and this plants into the audience's minds how easy it is because now they have more information than they had before. This is you basically doing the research for them and pretending to know all the things that they would like to know along the way. And finally, for a presentation potentially about a historical figure, let's take Martin Luther King Jr. for example. You can certainly do chronological order, and that works just as well. But another method to try might be talking about the different aspects of Martin Luther King Jr.'s life. We can first talk about him as a minister, then talk about him as a civil rights activist, and then finally his role as a cultural icon and a symbol for human rights. This is just a very small sample of the many different types of organization methods that can be applied to a presentation. There's no absolute way to do a presentation. These are simply just guidelines. The judge of your delivery and flow is and always will be the audience. So now the difficult part. How do I determine how much or how little content I should have? First and foremost, this will improve with time and experience, but here are some general guidelines. Normally, there's a time limit. I use this as a gauge to either fill or trim content. If it's 10 minutes, clearly 1 to 2 minutes for the intro, 1 to 2 minutes for the conclusion, 6 to 8 for the body. In the beginning, get in the habit of outlining your entire presentation. I know I've said this before and I'll keep saying it again throughout future lectures, but outlining is very critical. It'll help you do two things. First, give you a sense of flow, tone, and attitude that you personally have towards the presentation. What makes sense and what doesn't make sense. Second, how much time you actually spend speaking and relating to the audience to elicit feedback. How long would it take to explain this concept that you're presenting on to a family member? Try explaining these difficult topics to those who are completely unfamiliar with what you're presenting on. It's a great way to break down your message in a clear, concise, and simple manner. Make sure anyone, and I truly mean anyone, can understand what you're talking about. This way, even the most inexperienced person can understand what you're trying to get across. Another method might be to pretend you were having a conversation with your friend. What does that back and forth conversation sound like? Think through it and add the necessary parts and trim the unnecessary parts. We can't assume that the audience knows everything we do. Therefore, it's better to be verbose than terse. There are some that will know exactly what you're talking about, and others who will completely miss the entire point because you haven't broken it down simple enough for them. So ensuring that your points have been explained and vetted thoroughly beforehand is a really good way to make a full impact on the audience. Those who didn't understand before will now be able to grasp your message, and those who already knew will walk away with better examples for themselves. I found that really simple analogies are probably the best way to help any audience relate to an idea. Through building the body of the presentation, there will come a sense of flow, a theme, and a tone that you will naturally apply yourself. This is important to feel because the flow provides the energy through which you're going to channel your message. I talk quite a bit about flow, and what I mean by flow is a certain sense of rhythm, enthusiasm, pace, passion, or attitude for your topic. There are times when I make a presentation that I feel like I'm trying to force a point, but something just doesn't feel right about it. So I figure out another way to say it, or simply just take it out. On the flip side, I might feel that there's something that I really want to talk about, but just doesn't quite fit in. So I make a way for it to fit in, just so I can share it because I think it's valuable information, and that's completely okay to do. All presentations should have a point. Once you know what you want your audience to walk away with, then start putting the body together. Are you selling or educating? And then decide on the method of organization that makes the most sense for the content you're creating. Build the outline, pick your main talking points, organize your main talking points in a logical, coherent manner, add subtopics if necessary, and adhere to the time constraint. The body is how you hammer your main good talking points home. This takes advantage of visual aids, whiteboards, analogies, examples, stories, etc. This is also going to set the tempo of the room and the audience. How fast or how slow you move will depend on both your comfort level of the material and the audience feedback. If there is a time restraint, stay within it. If there's no time constraint, my recommendation, 10 to 20 minutes maximum, because after that, the audience just starts to fade away. Thank you for watching. Again, my name is Sunil Modi, and this is Presenting Yourself with Confidence by Silicon Valley English. If you would like more information, check out the links below or go to siliconvalleyenglish.net. Thank you very much, and have a great day.